is an unusual camera, although that's not unusual for Fujifilm, who really do make cameras that are not like the others. I'm going to show you photographs made with the Fujifilm X100 VI, explain what's so different about this camera and what makes some of those differences interesting and appealing. Fujifilm Canada loaned me this review model, and it goes back after I finish my review. I'm not paid or sponsored by anyone other than you, and I don't allow YouTube to interrupt my video with ads. No money's changed hands. Fujifilm doesn't get to see script or video before posting. Now, what makes the X100 VI unusual is its appreciation of and deference to the history of camera technology. It's an aficionado's camera. Watch aficionados understand the specifics and detail of the movements in Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, Rolex, or other prestigious watches. And their appeal is not that they keep time better than other watches. So the Fujifilm X100 VI similarly appeals to the discerning photographer who appreciates the craftsmanship of camera design as well as quality images. Because sometimes the engineering behind a product is just as interesting as the time it keeps or the pictures that it creates. Now you can see from the retro rangefinder inspired design that the X100 VI looks different from other cameras. It's easily mistaken for a vintage film camera, and this optional carrying case adds to that impression. Now even what you don't see, the sensor inside, is also unusual. It is a typical APS-C-sized 40 megapixel sensor, but while nearly all cameras use sensors with a standard Bayer pixel array to capture color, Fujifilm uses the more complex X-trans color array. Bayer and X-trans are different, but when you're looking at images, and these are all from the X100 VI, they're not that different. Even though the differences are subtle, careful inspection reveals improved color reproduction and improved contrast. Although the more obvious Bayer artifacts are less obvious at higher resolutions, even at 40 megapixels, X-trans has an advantage. Most cameras use processing to clean up the Bayer-induced impurities. They're not needed here. Back to what you can see, and what's immediately noticeable is that among the interesting dials and controls, this unusual camera does not have a mode dial. There's no obvious way to select P, A, S, or M settings. The aperture is set with a marked ring on the lens, and the shutter duration is set with a marked dial on the top panel. Note that both bulb and time settings are available. So, when you want the camera to take control of the aperture, set the aperture ring to A, the auto position. The camera acknowledges that with the on-screen S. You're now in shutter priority mode. Now, alternately, when you want the camera to select the appropriate shutter duration, set the shutter duration dial to A. The camera displays A. It's in aperture priority mode. Now, set both the ring and the dial to A for program, P, or set both to a setting other than A, and that's M for manual mode. Now, I find this approach both simpler and more intuitive. Physical controls with marked dials can be checked and set more easily and quickly than an abstract dial with only the on-screen display for reference. And here's an unusually clever touch that's a real historical artifact. To select the ISO, lift the exposure ring and dial in your setting. Again, there's an A position to automate ISO. Although the screen does display the settings, you can operate this camera without using the menu or the electronic displays. And for many experienced practitioners, that's an appealing characteristic. So the shutter duration dial only has full stops. use the rear dial for smaller intervals. And in program mode, the rear dial provides program shift settings. Now, the 6's viewfinder is on the left, and you can see the optical rangefinder style window from the front side. And that makes this camera more suitable for the right-eyed than the left. What is unusual in 2024 was not unusual in 1964. You view the scene through the window, not through the lens. A white guide frame shows you approximately the image area. Also unusually, this tiny lever switches from the optical view to an electronic through the lens preview. Now you see exactly what the lens sees. In 1964, that was the stuff of science fiction. Now, one more trick. Push the lever the other way and add an electronic overlay, bottom right, as a focus assist. Now, the touch LCD swivels up and down. That's not unusual. But when the camera is in portrait mode, the screen display reorients. Not usual. And in addition to touch focus and tap and snap, there's an unusual touch feature. Swiping across the screen in any of the 4 directions activates a custom function assigned in the menu. Now on the left side, this switch selects the focus mode, single, continuous, or manual. And unusually, this camera has 4 manual focus assists, in addition to expanded view, which appears when the lens's focus ring is turned. There's digital split image with both color and mono, a digital microprism, and focus peaking highlights. 4 colors, each with high and low. Now, and we've all faulted Fujifilm's focus in the past. Here, it's confident, fast, and accurate. Features like Face Eye Detect and the 6 subject detection modes work as expected. I guess we'll have to wait until the 7 to have the subjects detected using AI. Other vintage touches include the remote release screw mount on the shutter release. And the X100 VI continues Fujifilm's use of film simulations as the basis for their color profiles. It's an unusual approach based on Fujifilm's history of making analog films. These film simulations have been developed to mimic or simulate the color and tonality from those film types, the favorite of many photographers. 11 are color, including Provia, Velvia, and Astia. Then 3 monochrome options, including Acros, with filter variants. The new film simulation added for this model is Relay Ace, offering hard tonality with faithful color. And there are also digital simulations like Classic Chrome and Eternus Cinema. Well, that means no scene-specific selections like fall colors, sunset, or eclipse. Your choices are based on your preferences and sensibilities, which can add a thematic purpose to your work. And there are many Fujifilm photographers who have created their personal variations using the camera's other color and dynamic range settings. Search for Fujifilm recipes to see what they've done. Personally, I find the Acros simulation to be a powerful creativity boost. Another unusual thing, up to 3 film sims can be set as a bracket, which means that I immediately have images in Velvia, Relay, and Acros to choose from. Or, using the Playback RAW conversion tool, any film sim can be changed or added to any RAW file. Then, finally, you can change or add a film sim using the free desktop app XRAW Studio. Unusually here, you can only use this app while your camera is connected to your computer. And in addition to film sim, the X100 VI has more bracket options than usual: ISO, white balance, exposure, dynamic range, and focus. Fujifilm also provides the most complete and extensive multi-image capability, combining up to 9 exposures with 4 different methods. That's unfortunately offset by a very limited self-timer mode. Now, you will find an unusual number of ways to control dynamic range. HDR on the drive menu with 5 levels, in addition to a basic dynamic range setting with 3 levels in auto, an advanced dynamic range with 3 ranges, and tone control adjustments to interactively make highlight and shadow adjustments. That's offset by the limited meter mode options. I'm still hoping that Fujifilm's engineers add a highlight setting, or use the histogram, found on the screen display options. It's another of Fujifilm's unusual features. Many cameras have a few screen display selections. Fujifilm's display is fully customizable, 4 screens of options to add or remove any of the on-screen icons. Retro design does not imply any tech shortcoming. Fujifilm's smartphone app provides the usual image transfer, remote control, GPS location, and an unusual activity log. View your history to see the images taken on a specific day with lens and film simulation details. Although it's no longer as unusual, the app also lets you know when firmware updates are available and installs them wirelessly. Well, the lens on this camera is not interchangeable. In 2024, that seems like a drawback, but here it's an unusual advantage because it reminds you that until the very end of the previous millennium, cameras came with one fixed lens. Sometimes a limitation can increase your creativity. The integrated fixed focal length 23mm lens is the equivalent of what was the standard back in the day, a 35mm lens with a field of view of just over 50 degrees. Did that seem like a limitation as you've been looking at these images? The aperture opens to f2, and it can focus as close as 10 centimeters, near macro. An integrated lens offers 2 advantages. First, a leaf shutter can be used. Most cameras have a focal plane shutter. One curtain opens to allow the light to reach the sensor, another curtain closes to stop the exposure. Depending on the shutter duration and the readout speed of the sensor, that may result in artifacts like a shear on fast-moving subjects. Leaf shutters, like the X100 VI, are integrated into the lens, so it's a design that doesn't really lend itself to interchangeable lens cameras. Leaf shutters are also much quieter. The second advantage is the unusual ability to use an internal ND filter. Here, Fujifilm provides one 4-stop setting, not quite enough for shooting an eclipse. In Niagara, the cloud cover meant I really didn't need one. Did I mention you'll never get dust on the sensor? Or that there's no standing mounting thread for other filters? But here's how that gets unusual. There's a ring in front of the lens that screws off. Now, in the review kit, Fujifilm included this optional AR-X100 adapter ring. The adapter screws onto the mount. The adapter has a 49mm filter mount for this 49mm protective filter they also included. When the ring is removed, mount either of the optional conversion lenses Fujifilm sells for the X100 VI. The wide conversion lens, WCL X100 II with a factor of 0.8, providing a field of view similar to a 28mm lens. The tele version, TCL X100 II, has a 1.4 factor, the equivalent of a 50mm lens. And these lenses are not automatically detected. There's a menu setting to select which you are using. These conversion lenses do have filter mounts, 49mm for the tele, 67 for the wide. And in addition to the aperture ring, There's a second lens ring for focus in manual mode. Its unusual feature, there are multiple custom actions like white balance or film simulation. Then, for all the delightful, unusual features, there are also, for me anyway, some unnecessary features that detract from the overall value proposition of this camera. The X100 VI menu feels cluttered. Now, even if I don't represent the target photographer profile that Fujifilm's product managers envisioned, I'm pretty sure that I understand what appeals to the kinds of photographers who will be attracted to this camera. There are some unusual but unnecessary features. At least, I do not find them useful in my practice. On the shooting menu, the first two settings, Sports Finder and Pre-Shot, don't add value. Both were first implemented several years ago with significant limitations and exclusions. Fujifilm has not changed or improved them since. They now feel abandoned and push other more valuable settings down. For instance, why is the manual electronic shutter setting on the second screen? If you haven't seen these before, Sports Finder takes less than full sensor-sized images, meaning that you can see subjects before they enter the recording part of the image. Of course, because it's a crop, it reduces the image size to 24 megapixels from 40. It only works with the mechanical shutter setting, while Pre-Shot only works with the electronic shutter and burst mode. Pre-Shot buffers images while the shutter is soft press and then saves the 10 or so images from just before you full press. Both are awkward to get into and out of, and feel out of place on the X100 VI. I'm a video creator, but even for me, the emphasis on video here and elsewhere seems excessive. I'm fairly certain that the majority of us are not hybrid photographers. If you are a video-first creator, then video specs aside, this is not the camera for you. Or take the advanced filter setting from the drive menu, please. This small set of Instagram-inspired gimmicks is also out of place. I realize that this is the same sensor and processor as many other Fujifilm cameras, so these features are just part of the package. But in my mind, for this camera, I find they detract from the overall intention. A switch or menu setting that disables or hides video and some of these other distractions would be a most welcome addition in my mind. And although I don't recommend this camera for those who primarily record video, it is more than capable. For video, the highest quality setting is 4K HQ, which is oversampled from 6.2K, using the H.265 codec at 422 chroma subsampling 200 megabits. The 6.2K resolution can also be recorded. H.264 420 is also available, as is HD resolution. There's a high setting for overheating. Now, I happily concede that it's great for an occasional video recording when an unplanned situation occurs. And in 2024, the data rate, which maxes at 200 megabits, is a limiting factor, particularly if you plan to use the log settings or do color grading in post. I don't want to end on a negative note because I honestly enjoyed my time with the X100 VI. It's a conversation starter and an enjoyable piece of kit. With a great lens and an excellent sensor, it's a powerful and capable camera in adorable packaging. As I said, not sponsored. This kit goes back to Fujifilm, and I do read and reply to your civil comments and relevant questions. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.